But let all those that put their trust in thee rejoice. Let them ever shout for joy, because thou defendest them. Let them also that love thy name be joyful in thee. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio. And as always, we are greatly honored to have your attention and to have all of you join us in fellowship for the next 2 hours. We are continuing our ongoing discussion and examination of the book of Enoch. My good friend Rob Skiba. Rob, are you there, brother?
I am here. How are you doing, Zen?
All right, doing really well, man, and I appreciate you, joining me in this venture. It's been really a blessing for a lot of people, and I know we've brought up a lot of really incredible information in all the different chapters, and it's crazy to imagine that we're all, to 100 now. Chapter 100, and we have what, like 15 or 18 remaining, something of that nature.
Yeah, something like that. I forget how many chapters are in the book, but yeah, we are in the final countdown here, it looks like.
hmm Yeah, and I've been thinking about also, with the regard to the examination of Genesis, and I think that's a really great idea, because there's so much as far as like with the Targum version and also the legends of the Jews and different stories. Like even when we were talking about how Dinah, the how she had a Asenath and how a Asenath became the daughter. I mean, the wife of Joseph,
Yeah.
and how that bloodline and everything was preserved. It's those kind of stories which I think would, benefit people in hearing some of the narrative that they might not be familiar with. So, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely think we should do that.
Yeah, my thought on that was just kind of thinking out loud here is Josher like unpacks Genesis
Right.
like massively. So,
Yes.
maybe we like do a chapter of Genesis and then unpack that same portion of whatever it talked about,
Right.
in Joshua and then Targums or anything else that's out there. That could take us for a couple of years probably at the rate we're going.
Absolutely. And it would add so much great detail to the story, and it would bring forth a lot of sources that others might not be familiar with. So, yeah, I definitely think that would be a good idea. At least going through, some portion of maybe Genesis and Exodus. But, and then when we get to all of the law, then we could decide on even something different, or whatever we choose to pick up after then.
Yeah, well, on the virtual house church, um, we we started it back up when in the weekly portions
Uh-huh.
the world was tuning into the start of the Book of Numbers. So, because when I first sort of came to the conclusion that I was going to restart virtual house church, we were already a few weeks into Leviticus, so I didn't want to jump part way in. So I
Uh-huh.
was like, well, all right, the people that I was talking to was like, let's just wait out Leviticus while we're everybody's doing it, and then when we get to Numbers, we'll start with Numbers 1. So I have a feeling, but between virtual house church and this, we may collide at some point in terms of
Right.
where we are in the in the narrative. So that might be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, and that it's awesome that you do have the other aspect of what you're working on with the virtual house church and those guys joining you, and sharing narrative on all of those other chapters and scriptures. And so, yeah, this would be an addition to all that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything you want to bring up with regard to work or anything that's going on? How's the planting and the harvest and all that?
Well, I mean, it's getting hotter here, for sure,
Yeah.
here in Texas. But the plants, for the most part, are still hanging in there. I've had a few more casualties. It's so depressing. It's like,
Yeah.
at the seedling stage, you're like, oh man, what the heck, and then you get a little bit past the seedling stage, you're excited, you bring them outside, then they die, you're like, oh, and then you have
Yeah.
a bunch that do survive, and they start to mature and they start to grow, and then bugs get them, birds get them, critters get them, and you're trying to guard against that, and you finally get some going, and then you turn around and look over there, and this one's withered because it wasn't watered enough, or it's too hot, or I'm like, man,
Right.
this is a really difficult deal. It's nowhere near
Yeah.
as easy as I would have thought going into it. But that said, we do have some that are looking like they're pretty good. Sheila came in today. She's like, oh, we got baby cucumbers. She's like, we got some
Awesome.
cucumbers about the size of my pinky. I'm like, yeah, right on.
Nice.
And
Nice.
some beans and stuff. So we're getting a few things out of it, but
Uh-huh.
not nearly to justify the expense that went into it. At least not at this stage, anyway. So
Well, you learn it,
yeah.
and you pay for that knowledge. So
You'd pay for it one way or another, that's for sure.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Crazy stuff in the world, but man, trying to do my part as best I can to try to make a difference in it. But man, it is not easy.
yeah. No. My son is going through that whole process as well. Now that they have land, and he's really enjoying it, though. As far as the learning and. But yes, plants are very sensitive, and if you overwater them or underwater them or too much sun or not enough sun. But it's been a really great season here in Georgia as far as all of the rain and not having to water a lot because
Hmm.
we've had a lot of storms and not long stretches of just sunshine, and so
Yeah, we've had some
it's
pretty. Well, of course, June typically here in Texas, we get some June storms that are pretty rocking.
right.
I mean,
uh
Texas knows how to do everything big. It's like
right.
it's some pretty rocking storms here. A lot of water. So yeah, I mean, not too bad
Right
overall.
on.
Things are
Well,
moving forward with the other projects. It's
yeah.
pretty good stuff there. I've had a number of recent contacts, people reaching out to me in email, offering various services and stuff like that. So,
Awesome.
I've had several conversations with different people who all, in one way or another, have some sort of big project. We had an update with the South African team earlier this week. I think it was Tuesday, and Mornay Tienison, he's sort of my line producer over there. After the call was over, it was a short call, just kind of updating me on where they are with the project. Mornay and I talked for a good while afterwards, and he's got some stuff that he's doing with some other people, and various, just lots of different projects going on. I'm like, okay, Father, I mean, looking around at the news, it really does feel like tomorrow's the end of the world. I mean,
Yeah.
it just does.
Right.
But yet I see so many people that are really like just on the edge, right on the verge of thinking that something's going to break, something's going to happen, and been given very big visions to accomplish. And
Uh-huh.
I have to look at it and say, Father, if He's faithful to complete what He's begun, then He's begun a whole lot of stuff and a whole lot of people, not just what I'm doing. That leads me to believe that we have to have more time,
Right.
and that somehow provision's going to come.
Right.
For all of
Right.
these things, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money to make any of them happen. So, I don't what that's going to look like or how it's going to play out. I just think, man, especially between now and November, things are going to get really interesting. I have a feeling.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think. Well, then they're hyping up everything with now, perhaps a second wave of all the
Right.
as far as the pandemic and everything. And so who knows how all that's going to unfold and play out as well. But myself, I'm just going to keep working and doing the projects and trying to maintain a sense of normality as far as life and the work and effort. And I'm almost done now with this whole pre-Adamic book, and so I'm glad to
Hmm.
be able to move on from that. And I'm getting excited the more I'm thinking about this Enoch movie script and everything
Yeah.
of what can be incorporated and all that. So yeah, so hopefully I'll have something together, at least a base outline that I can send something to you, and then we can start brainstorming on all this and uh, see where it goes and what happens with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jake has published that thing on YouTube that I played
Oh, awesome!
a
I'll
little
have to
bit
check
of.
that out.
Yeah, I know he's got some more plans for it. He actually put some pretty cool visuals. He didn't put like visuals that went along with the reading necessarily, but he had some just interesting background kind of going on with the text on the screen. Just said Book of Enoch or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But I'm excited for him. I think it's a cool project, and it's given me some thoughts of maybe I'm going to approach him with some ideas on potential collaboration moving forward.
Yeah.
But and definitely want to get him on board. I mean, after listening to him do all the different voices, and I know he's
Right.
a very competent editor and videographer
Right.
and other things too. So I want to get to a place where I can actually pay some of these people.
Yes,
Get
yes.
staff. I mean, I've been watching the special features of the Mandalorian, and I just Sheila and I were just talking about it last night. I'm like, I so want to have that day when there's a team of people, like we're gathering together every day, all united in the same thing to complete the project and do this, make this thing happen.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I got various people all over the place that are interested, but I mean, really, to really make it happen, you just got to have the budget, and people need to
Right.
get paid because people need to eat, and that's the people are always like, when is this thing going to happen? I'm like, as soon as it's funded. it's the only,
Yeah.
it's the only thing
Yeah.
holding it back, man. That's it.
Right. Right.
So, well, in the meantime, we just keep plugging away and doing what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And things come together, windows of opportunity, doors of opportunity. As you progress, things will happen, and the Father will make provision. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, just keep doing what we do.
Did you see Globebusters this past Sunday?
I did not.
They did a whole thing on the firmament.
Really?
It was quite interesting. I'm not gonna say I'm fully on board with some of the. They had a guy on there. I forget the guy's name. I think it's called Centilli Satellite or Centilli Imaging or something like that. I forget what it was, but it was this interesting idea of using. I think it was a concave, magnifying mirror, like a beauty mirror.
Yeah.
It's kind of curved, and you look at it, and your face is enlarged. It's like they had this. I was sort of listening and doing other things at the same time, so I wasn't like really engaged and paying attention. But from what I could gather, it looked like they had one of those types of mirrors. And you ever see those like half dome magnifying glasses?
Oh, yeah.
And people were using those to show how the sun works and how it
Right.
creates like a coffee cup caustic,
Yes.
to have the 24-hour sun and all that. Well,
Uh-huh.
apparently they were going through like the old documentation. Like I did a video on it. Dean Odell did. Other people have done videos on the government documents that talk about
Right.
stationary flat Earth,
Right.
non-rotating, and also CIA documents talking about trying to figure out the firmament. And the detractors say no, they're just talking about the sky, but the document interchanges the word sky and firmament. So I mean, it talks about various atmospheric stuff that they're looking for and measuring in the sky, but they also talk about things related to the firmament. And somewhere in there, I guess, I don't know if it was Bob or somebody picked up on this certain type of this technique, whatever it was. And so this guy, I can't remember his YouTube channel either. Anyway, he took this concave like beauty mirror and then put one of those half dome magnifying glasses in the center of it, and then was taking like video and then analyzing still frames from the video taken from that. So you're looking through a lens that's magnified by a beauty mirror. So it's sort of like if you could stick a camera into a telescope, before it gets to your eyepiece, I guess. I don't really know how to explain it, but anyway, they were picking up some really bizarre anomalies that are only visible with this technique. Like you could look up with your own eyes and not see it. You could look up with a telescope and not see it, but you could look at through this thing and see stuff. Anyway, it was really interesting. I'm probably butchering it, but
Well, at least you're piquing everybody's interest.
Well, yeah, everybody can go check it out for themselves. It's like a 4-hour video. That of course
Wow.
I
4 hours.
watched it double speed, so everything's
Yeah, yeah.
everything's in the chipmunk mode. But it was just fascinating. I would like to go back and listen to it again and kind of pay attention to it this time. But it was getting a little weird around the 3 hour mark. I'm going, I don't know about that, but anyway, interesting. I mean, they did a whole series on the firmament that I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, with those half dome magnifying glasses, when you turn them upside down and you put a backdrop of stars, and then you look at the lower portion of the firmament and rotate, you can see how the stars seemingly, because of the larger portion of the firmament, they seem to move backwards.
Uh-huh.
And so that, and we have a video of this, how the southern stars have that appearance, and
Right.
they're being ecliptic and everything. But in my mind, it affirms prospectively, visually, what we see with the firmament spread out
Yeah.
in large arch across us.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that helps people to visualize and to understand what is going on prospectively.
Yeah, somebody in the chat room just said, Rob, come to Croatia. We can see Italy from our coast 250 kilometers distance.
Wow.
I'm like, what? Wow, that's, I mean, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, and it's those kind of things that prove the non-existent nature of curvature. But anyways,
Yeah,
we've covered that quite a bit.
for sure. So, where are we?
Yeah,
90.
chapter 100.
Well, you're on 100. I think I'm on
Yeah.
98 because it seemed like things got a little wonky last time in terms of the way the chapters were between the two. I think that's where I'm at. So I'll do. Looks like 98 is short. 99. And then you can do 100 and see if that lines up.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah. For me, 98's like 3 verses. So.
Oh wow.
Okay. Lawrence translation. In those days shall fathers be struck down with their children in the presence of each other, and brethren with their brethren shall fall dead, until a river shall flow from their blood. For a man shall not restrain his hand from his children, nor from his children's children. His mercy will be to kill them. Nor shall the sinner restrain his hand from his honored brother. From the day of dawn to the setting sun shall the slaughter continue. The horse shall wade up to his breast, and the chariot shall sink to its axle in the blood of sinners. Well, I mean, Revelation talks about that.
Right, the horse's bridle.
Yeah, actually, right up to the bridle. So, I mean, here's another direct reference. Where we find precedence in Scripture. Scripture finds precedence in the book of Enoch, I should say.
Right.
99. In those days the angels shall descend into places of concealment and gather together in one spot all who have assisted in crime. In that day shall the Most High rise up to execute the great judgment upon all sinners, and to commit the guardianship of all the righteous and holy to the holy angels, that they may protect them as the apple of an eye, until every evil and every crime be annihilated. Whether or no the righteous sleep securely, wise men shall then truly perceive, and the sons of the earth shall understand every word of that book, knowing that their riches cannot save them in the ruin of their crimes. Woe to you, ye sinners, when you shall be afflicted on account of the righteous in the day of the great trouble, shall be burnt in the fire, and be recompensed according to your deeds. Woe to you, ye perverted in heart, who are watchful to obtain an accurate knowledge of evil, and to discover terrors. No one shall assist you. Woe to you, ye sinners, for with the words of your mouths and with the work of your hands have you acted impiously. In the flame of a blazing fire shall you be burnt. And now know ye that the angels shall inquire into your conduct in heaven. Of the sun, the moon, and the stars shall they inquire, respecting your sins. For upon earth you exercise jurisdiction over the righteous. Every cloud shall bear witness against you, the snow, the dew, and the rain. For all of them shall be withholden from you, that they may not descend upon you, nor become subservient to your crimes. Now then bring gifts of salutation to the rain, that not being withholders, it may descend upon you, and to the dew, it if it has received from you gold and silver. But when the frost, snow, cold, every snowy wind, and every suffering belonging to them fall upon you, in those days you will be utterly incapable of standing before them. Hmm. Interesting. I don't know. Did you look at? Oh, I guess that is. Yeah, that's about right. Looks like
Yeah,
100.
it is.
100 goes along
It's
with that.
correct.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Good.
Chapter 100. All right, Charles. In those days, in one place, the fathers together with their sons shall be smitten, and brothers one with another shall fall in death, till the streams flow with their blood. For a man shall not withhold his hand from slaying his sons and his sons' sons, and the sinner shall not withhold his hand from his honored brother. From dawn till sunset they shall slay one another, and the horse shall walk up to the breast in the blood of sinners, and the chariot shall be submerged to its height. In those days the angels shall descend into the secret places and gather together into one place all those who brought down sin, and the Most High will arise on that day of judgment to execute great judgment amongst sinners. And over all the righteous and the holy he will appoint guardians from amongst the holy angels, to guard them as the apple of an eye, until he makes an end of all wickedness and all sin. And though the righteous sleep a long sleep, they have not to fear. And then the children of the earth shall see the wise in security, and shall understand all the words of this book, and recognize that their riches shall not be able to save them in the overthrow of their sins. Woe to you, sinners, on the day of strong anguish, ye who afflict the righteous and burn them with fire. Ye shall be requited according to your works. Woe to you, ye obstinate of heart, who watch in order to devise wickedness. Therefore shall fear come upon you, and there shall be none to help you. Woe to you, ye sinners, on account of the words of your mouth, and on account of the deeds of your hands, which are godlessness as wrought in blazing flames, burning worse than fire shall ye burn. And now know ye that from the angels he will inquire as to your deeds in heaven, from the sun and from the moon, and from the stars in reference to your sins, because upon the earth ye execute judgment on the righteous. And he will summon to testify against you every cloud and mist and dew and rain, for they shall all be withheld because of you from descending upon you, and they shall be mindful of your sins. And now give presents to the rain, that it be not withheld from descending upon you, nor yet the dew, when it has received gold and silver from you, that it may descend. When the hoarfrost and snow with their chilliness, and all the snowstorms with all their plagues fall upon you, in those days ye shall not be able to stand before them.
This is interesting because presumably this is an end time judgment context,
Right.
and it sounds like before the earth gets burned up with fire, it's gonna get one heck of a snowstorm.
Uh-huh.
That's interesting. I never saw that before.
Yeah, no, I haven't either. Also it says here that they will be withheld. And in some of the end time narratives that we have studied, there seems to be that the earth, the rain is withheld near what seems in some of the stories to be the latter half of the Great Tribulation and the reign of the Antichrist, and that whether it's connected to the wrath of God being poured out on the wicked or however it plays out, there's a portion of the last times in the last days where the rain is said to be withheld and that the land becomes brazen like clay in a kiln. It becomes very hard and dry. And that it also describes in some of the passages that water becomes very a rare commodity, and that
Mm-hmm.
they are having to dig, and that whatever water is here from the supposedly wormwood has some aspect of the this kind of red dust. In the Colburn Bible, it describes it having this weirdness with connected to this
Hmm.
red dust, and that's what turns the rivers and the waters blood, and that they are forced to drink blood because that's part of what they do in the ritual and the ceremonies, satanic, where they consume the blood and cannibalize the flesh, and so God brings us as judgment on them at the end of days, according to some of the manuscripts. All right, we'll be right back, everyone.
Discover the extraordinary powers of intuitive healing with pain transmutation, a method of holistic healing for the human soul, body, mind, and emotions. If you are looking for answers and a deep understanding of how to help yourself and the people around you to live a happier, healthier life, this is the right place for you. Learn how to read your soul's history in the Akashic Records. Remove negative energy attachments from your astral body and start the process of inner and outer pain transmutation. Join Pain Transmutation Community to get started on the path of intuitive healing. Change your energetic state, manifest new and exciting experiences, re-energize your life, and build inspiring connections with others in our community.
Hey, it's Grace. Can we talk about something serious for a minute? Your age. Getting old has its perks. But remember, being a few years younger, you know, your hair was thicker, you didn't have so many wrinkles, that extra weight wasn't haunting you, and you just felt better. Well, we can't turn back the clocks and go back 10 or 15 years, but you can start feeling and looking 10 or 15 years younger with Nature's Youth RSF. It's a doctor-formulated daily supplement that helps your body maintain its peak performance and fight the aging process. Imagine sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better. See how Nature's Youth RSF has helped thousands of people just like you at naturesyouth.com. naturesyouth.com. Imagine how it will feel when your family and friends are asking you what you did to look so good. Your secret will be Nature's Youth RSF. It's time to start looking better and feeling better. Learn more and order your Nature's Youth RSF at naturesyouth.com. That's naturesyouth.com. That's naturesyouth.com.
For millennia, mankind has been searching for answers to the big questions, such as, where did the universe come from? Where did we come from? Why are we here? Are we alone? And just what the heck is the Sasquatch all about? I can't promise you answers, and neither can the Woo Crew, but they invite you to join them Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, midnight in the UK, for Freaky Friday, exclusively on Truth Frequency Radio. Spirituality, multiverse, quantum mechanics, the occult, and so much conspiracy analysis that it will make your mind melt. Take my word for it. Freaky Friday. It's more than a show. It's a way of life. I am Stephen Hawking, and I am proud to be a Wookiee.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are TFR, your protection from deception.
And in those days, there were giants in the land, and the sons of the angels of God looked among the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Here on Earth, we're intrigued by the sun, moon, and stars, and imagine there's got to be planets like ours. So conceive of a face on the surface of Mars, so in need of a meaning and purpose we fall. And indeed, they believe that these might be our gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve, and eventually reach what they seek, and then solve all the problems of man. But they really don't know that they fall, and the works of our hands are but just filthy rags. So we travel the lands to dig up our past, time elapses, and with it are much of the facts. Some imagine that gods came in alien class to react to the sweetness of desperate.
O sentinels of the universe who watch for the destroyer, how long will your coming vigil last? O mortal men who wait without understanding, where will you hide yourselves in the dread days of doom, when the heavens shall be torn apart and the skies rent in twain? All right, I'll turn it back over to you, brother. Did you want to bring up something on this chapter?
There were some other things. Let me see here. In the beginning of it, that caught my attention. Let's see. Show up the heavens, restraining the rain and dew. Something about the angels gathering everybody into one place. I'm trying to remember where that was here. It was early on. Oh wait, I'm looking at Lawrence. Sorry. Oops, gotta go back. Yeah. In those days, the angels shall descend into the secret places and gather together into one place all those who brought down sin, and the Most High will arise in that day of judgment to execute great judgment amongst the sinners. That's interesting. It says he's going to send angels to gather into one place. That reminds me of where who goes first, right? The wheat or the tares. And he's sending out angels to gather them together. That's why it's like, I started to realize that once I came off the pre-trib rapture page, it's good to be left behind. You want to be left behind because it's the bad guys that get taken away.
Yes.
To be burned
the
up.
The tares are gathered first.
Gather up to be burned. Yeah.
Right.
So again, here's another precedent, and Yeshua talks about that, right? So this would be a case where he's not directly quoting Enoch per se, he's describing something that only had precedence in the book of Enoch. We don't see evidence of those specific words in that specific scenario, that not that I'm aware of anyway, nothing I can think of anyway, in the canonized prophets anywhere or the Torah.
Right. Yeah, and then as we had mentioned previously with regard to the horse's bridle and that mentioned in the book of Revelation, that certainly I've never seen anywhere else.
Yeah, that's specific.
Any kind of association to that.
Yeah, exactly. That specific terminology too. Blood rising up to the bridle of the horse.
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of blood.
Lots. Yeah.
Man. And verse 5 seems to be where we get the idea of guardian angels.
Right.
Right. Are you aware of it seems like there was something like that earlier in the Enoch, though, too. Can you think of any other reference within Enoch where it talks about people being assigned guardian angel?
Not specifically offhand, but I know that the vision of Paul talks about this, and we had covered one chapter when we were talking about the book of Enoch, about how the soul goes on to judgment, and then afterwards they go on to either the place of the righteous, where the righteous dwell, or the place of perdition. And I had read the judgment of a soul after death from the vision of Paul, and it makes mention there of the guardian angel, and also about how when you go before the Most High, both the good and the malign angels, they come before you to see as far as your disposition, and whether if you have a guardian, with you to protect you from the bad angels and to keep them from dragging you down, almost like that whole Ebenezer Scrooge, um, that whole thing. But
Yeah.
Andy, I was just going to say one last thing with regard to, well, I think it's the book of Jubilees or one of those, maybe it's the book of the bee, but it also talks about the guardian angels as well as being assigned with each of humanity.
I've always joked that when I get to heaven, my guardian angel's going to punch me right in the face for all the crap that I put him through.
Right.
Especially as a young person. Somebody had posted
goodness. Yeah, me too.
a little video of looked like, a young kid, probably under 10 years of age, I'd guess, riding his little BMX bike, and he goes over this ramp, and he makes a really good, impressive jump onto the grass. But he's wearing like a crash helmet. A bicycle helmet, and it's a cute little video. But I said, Dad, that's nothing. We used to do it without helmets and
Right.
and without grass,
Right.
back in the day. The kind of crazy stuff we used to do. Oh my goodness,
Uh-huh.
a lot of crazy
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a wonder that we even made it through all that.
We made it past adolescence,
Right.
because of course, when you're younger than a teenager, and even in your teen years, I mean, you think you're completely invincible.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, there was one time, 'cause I used to do a lot of mountain climbing, and there's a mountain not too far from where I lived that I used to like to go to, Skinner Mountain. Actually, there's a summit house on the top of it, and that's where Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens wrote Huckleberry Finn. He was looking down over the Connecticut River Valley, and it reminded him of, I guess, the Mississippi, and so that's where he was inspired to write that. But there's some really good cliff faces there. But the problem is, it's all shale. It's shale rock. So, like,
fragments.
Well, you can literally take the mountain apart. You could just start grabbing pieces of the mountain, take it apart. And I was up climbing by myself one time, which was stupid. And I was walking across this ledge, but as I'm walking across the ledge, it's breaking away as I'm walking,
Yeah.
And so, where the direction I came was no longer there; it was gone. In fact, my hands just broke into a sweat just now, just talking about it. And I come around, I'm working my way around this cliff, and everywhere I'm stepping is breaking away, and the piece that I'm standing on, I'm like, oh my God, And then I look, and there's no more pieces for me to stand on. So I'm literally on this one little piece. And I'm totally freaking out. I'm not really high, but I'm high enough that if I fall, I'm either going to be seriously hurt or dead, or die. And I just remember I was frozen on the side of that cliff for what seemed like forever. I have no idea what the actual duration of time was. It just seemed like forever. And I'm praying and I'm praying. I'm like, what am I going to do? I can't go. There's no direction for me to go, other than falling. And then I looked and I saw a tree branch that was sticking out, kind of just. The cliff kind of curved, and I was like, man, if I could just spring off enough to catch that tree branch. But I didn't know if that tree branch was going to hold me either.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like, what choice? That's the only available option that I had.
Oh wow.
So I took a leap and I jumped and I got that branch, and it held. Obviously, because I'm still here. And I used that to pull myself up, and freaked out. I'm just laying there forever, just thanking God, thank you,
No doubt.
And then I got to thinking about that. I'm thinking, wow, at some point in the past, God had a bird drop a seed in that crack,
right,
at just the right time for that branch to grow to the length and strength that it was to hold me. When I jumped on it, to literally save my life.
You.
But I mean, I had lots of that kind of stuff as a kid. I was just reckless, crazy, and thinking I'm invincible. And I'm going, man, yeah, my guardian angel's gonna punch me right in the mouth. He's like, welcome to heaven, pow!
Right. I put mine on overtime as well. I think a lot of us do, and especially, all the adrenaline junkies now.
Oh man,
my goodness! But yeah, there's a lot of people that don't survive some of the stuff that they're doing. But
yeah, well, so looking at this in more of a end time stuff, it says and over all the righteous in this end times context, and holy, he will appoint guardians from amongst the holy angels to guard them as the apple of an eye, until he makes an end of all. See, this goes to, people. I see memes that people who are preacher rapture guys that are against, guys like us, and I saw a picture of, you don't believe in pre-trib, and they had a picture of a Barbie doll, and it's like Ken's bride, and it was like pre-trib bride, and then they showed a Barbie doll that was like all banged up and like abused, and they're like post-trib bride, and I'm like, you're an idiot. That's not what any of us believe, But to be honest, a pre-tribber will never admit this, but it's a simple fact, and I can say this because I was a pre-tribber for over 40 years of my life, hardcore dogmatic pre-tribber that drew charts and stuff, okay, and taught on it. That they have a mentality. They'll never admit this, but it's the truth. That there's two brides. There's the bride of God and the bride of Christ. And the bride of Christ gets, taken up, and we get to go hang out and have a little party while Dad, the wife beater, beats the snot out of the Jews for 7 years. Like Dad's a wife beater, but good cop, bad cop, right? Jesus is he's the loving, good husband, and Dad's gonna beat the snot out of his bride for 7 years. And I'm like, no. The book of Exodus gives us the story. You can look at the plagues of Exodus and look at the plagues of Revelation, and they are there's a direct correlation. Just do up a spreadsheet, put the Exodus on the left and Revelation on the right, and it's a direct correlation. Mm-hmm. And so if that being the case, and I've come to believe, especially after 10 years of doing Torah cycles, that the end times is just an amped up repeat of Exodus, with the days of Noah thrown in as the icing on the cake. So if that's the case, then if you look at the Exodus scenario, God's people still experienced 3 of the 10 plagues. But the other 7, they were preserved in it. They weren't preserved from it. They were preserved in it. It's just like the fiery furnace, right? They still had to go in the furnace, but they're preserved in the furnace. Daniel still had to go in the lion's den, but he was preserved from the lions. Right. We have and if you go into Joshua, it gets even, Abraham had similar trials that he had to go through. Yes. So, we have numerous examples of the saints, the righteous, being preserved in the trial, not from it.
The flood. Noah.
Yeah, Noah's a perfect example.
Yeah.
I don't think we really think about how horrific the events of the flood were.
Oh my goodness!
They had to have been hearing.
Can't even imagine.
First of all, just the trauma of the fountains of the deep being broken up, combined with the windows of heaven open. You got torrential water coming from both directions, creating a massive washing machine, of turmoil and turbulence and everything. Meanwhile, you got all the animals screaming in the ark. I'm sure Noah and his family were freaking out as that thing's being tossed around. And outside the ark, you would hear nothing but the wailing and screaming of all the animals and the people and Nephilim and everything else that was perishing.
Dying.
Yeah. And people banging, "Let me in! I believe you now! I believe you now! Let me in!" Well, you got to know that was one incredibly horrific experience. Yes, they were preserved from the judgment, but they still had to go through it.
End of the world. You can't get any worse than that.
Yeah, truly. I got people right now on Facebook on my page trying to convince me that it was just a localized flood. I'm like, guys, first of all, the Bible doesn't support that. Enoch doesn't support that. Every single ancient culture all over the world has the same story.
Right.
Fossils and rock layers prove it.
Mountains.
There's like overwhelming evidence. This is what just frustrates the heck out of me about people like Dr. Michael Heiser, because he subscribes to the local flood thing too.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
I don't know how much he does, but he at least gives a nod to it. Like, he can accept that could be the case. And I'm like, no, man, this is a world. If it was a localized thing, he could have just told Noah and his family to move.
Right.
Exactly, because he had 120 years, so I don't care how far in the earth he had to go. He had 120 years to go.
Yeah.
He could have moved his family. Hey, look, this area's gonna get wiped in a flood. Let's go. Let's go. Move.
Yeah, let's leave.
Let's go move to Australia before they call it Australia or whatever.
Yeah, and if that was the case, why wouldn't God like with Abram, just tell him, hey, why don't you head down south, go to this land instead of hanging out here.
Yeah. I don't get it. I mean, it's a worldwide deal. So in this scenario where we have, well, first a big massive snowstorm, it looks like, and then we're going to have a catastrophic judgment by fire. We see the righteous are preserved in it, through it, during it. And I actually had a dream. I mean, it was like one of those, I hesitate to call it an open vision, but it was more than a dream. Whatever it was very real and very tangible to me. And in this dream,
significantly different.
Significantly, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was in this dream I was at a very large banquet table with all kinds of food on it and lots of people there, and a very bright glowing figure at the end of the table that I assumed was Yeshua. And we were in this enclosed, it was like a dome. This is before Flat Earth. This is years before it. But we were in like a glass dome. And outside of it was just absolute horror, like the world ripping itself apart, everybody killing each other, just horror, absolute horror outside of that enclosure. And then I woke up, it was just, whoa, okay, that was, but what I felt like that what the Lord was telling me with that was that was Goshen, that the Israelites, yes, they experienced the first 3, but for the remaining 7, which got progressively worse, they were preserved in it until he finally escorted everybody out of it.
Interesting.
And so, I mean, we have in Revelation 12 that the devil knows his time is short, right? So he comes down and he sends a flood, but the earth swallows up the flood, and the people are taken out to the wilderness, and they're preserved for a season out there. So it seems to me that that's what this is talking about here, is us being preserved until he makes an end of all the wickedness and all sin.
Right.
But it says, though the righteous sleep a long sleep, they have not to fear. There was I forget the address now. It's a psalm. I want to say it's Psalm 26 or 126 or something. I forget. Now I lay me down to sleep. For you, O Lord, make me dwell in safety, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's been a long time since I've felt the need to quote it, but in my late teens and early 20s, I had fairly regular experiences with sleep paralysis and shadow people and lots of very scary stuff.
Oh, wow.
And that was the prayer. It's like, I mean, I got to the point where I would literally go to sleep with a machete, a Bible,
oh my goodness.
and that prayer. Like, I'd have, I would just keep reciting it until I finally fell asleep. It took great comfort in that, So that's when I read that here in Enoch, that's what it made me think about, going to sleep in peace. And actually Psalm 91 talks about, something very similar to that, being sheltered in the shadow of the Almighty.
Yes.
Under his wings, etc.
Right. Well, I am grateful that I've not been one to experience all the, with regard to the shadow people and living in old houses that are haunted and where weird kind of stuff is going on. I'm grateful. The only time I ever had a weird thing like that was when we were playing with a Ouija board.
Well, that's what opens it up.
Yeah, I saw somebody get possessed, and that was a creepy experience.
When I think back on those days when it all started, I had a friend of mine who his parents got a divorce during our high school years, and his mom took him away to, I think it was Arkansas, for I think it was sophomore year, and he hated it. He's like, oh man, he hated being away from all his friends and everything, And,
especially in high school.
Yeah, especially in high school after being, going through all the other years of school with all these kids, So when he came back on summer vacation, I asked my parents. I said, can he stay with us? Finish out high school here. And my parents said, yeah, sure. I mean, he could stay with us. So
awesome.
There was we were cellar dwellers in the basement. I had my room was in the basement, and there was a room that was like an arts and craft room outside of the door, the wall and the door to my bedroom. The other side of it was like an arts and craft area that we made into his bedroom. And the first time that the shadow person thing happened, it was late at night. It always happened like between 2 and 3 a.m., somewhere in that, they call it the witching hour. And it was always around that time that I heard a bang on that wall. And, it jolted me awake. And then I was awake, but I was like in sleep paralysis. Like I was awake and conscious, but I couldn't move. And, I'm looking over and I see, it was already dark, but I see something darker than dark kind of move where the door was. And then I felt the end of my bed go down, like somebody was standing on it. And I was totally terrified. And then Mark was his name. He opened the door and kicked the lights on, and then my sleep paralysis went, and whatever was in there disappeared. And he's all mad at me. He's like, "What are you doing, man? What the heck's your problem?" I'm like, "I didn't do anything, man. What are you talking about?" He says, "You were standing on the end of my bed." I was like, "No, I wasn't."
Oh my God!
I said, "What was that bang?" He said, "Well, I went to kick you, and I ended up kicking the wall." I said, "Well, whatever was on your bed, you kicked into my room because the thing stood on the end of my bed afterwards."
Oh my God!
So I knew I wasn't crazy because I had other witnesses to many of the occurrences that took place.
Mm-hmm.
But his sisters were messing around with Ouija boards and stuff. So it makes you wonder if you end up picking up hijackers. Sometimes by messing around. I never messed around with it, but I mean, you never know how these doorways get open, right?
Right. Yeah, kids. They now get together on a Friday evening and hang out and play with Ouija boards, and think it's great fun, and
you can buy it at the Toys R Us.
Right,
that's
right. I know,
totally crazy, man.
Yeah, it really is
not cool. Speaking of Satan coming down, I saw that Kevin posted a question in the chat room. It says, "Rob, can you or Zen tell me if Satan has access to heaven right now, because it can be confusing?" It is kind of confusing. It is my opinion that where we see in Job now with the flat Earth cosmology, biblical cosmology, if you take biblical cosmology and marry it to Heiser's divine council concept, and put that all like the Jedi Council meeting in the tower on Coruscant, and apply that to Mount Meru, that's sort of the way I see it now. I don't. There was before biblical cosmology, I might have said yes, I think he did have access to heaven because of Job, the sons of God presenting himself and Satan being among them.
Right.
I tend to think now more of the prison I don't want to say planet, but plane, enclosed world idea, and that he can get to the top of the high mountain, perhaps, and interact with the divine council. But I don't think he has access to the heaven above the firmament. What are your thoughts?
No, I fully agree with you. And there's a story actually when we return from break that I'll share that one of the fallen angels talks about how they have no place, but they want to go up to where God has His counsel, and to try to listen in to hear prophetically what's going to happen later. And so yeah, when we go into break, but I'll share that, and because it does talk about that. But I agree with you. I don't think Satan has access. That ever since their banishment, the war in heaven, the rebellion, the revolt, that they've been imprisoned here, and that I also believe, and I write about how I think that the firmament being put into place was part of their imprisonment below the vaulted dome of the earth, and that they don't have access to the heaven of heavens any longer, and they cannot go before the presence of God because they've been banished from, going or being within His presence.
So I heard something else, and I if I'm not mistaken, I think you lean in this direction, but I had a meeting with a friend of mine. He's actually a founding pioneer guy that helped develop motion capture for CGI and that kind of stuff. And he's a strong believer. And he's like, "Dude, I've been teaching Sunday school for like 22 years. He said, "The word's just coming alive all of a sudden to me like never before. I've been in it my whole life, but just stuff's jumping out at me like I've never seen before." And he came to the conclusion that we were angelic beings before the Genesis 1 annihilation. And
Yeah, I fully agree.
And that part of the judgment of those angels in there was to come back here in the prison that was created, the firmament created as a prison.
Right.
And within that, we would have the opportunity to repent,
yes.
but do so as humans.
Right. Be born in the flesh, yes.
And I was like, it's interesting because I do this show with this guy Zen, and he's been talking about a lot of stuff just like, he's like, really? And he was sharing several things that he was coming to on his own. Same thing with the Genesis 3, what was going on there. And I was like, yeah, dude, you're going to have to go. I sent them a link to the playlist of our series that we're doing here. But he just took it as confirmation because he's like, I never read it anywhere. I never heard it anywhere. It's just, this is what I feel like the Holy Spirit's showing me as I've been going through Scripture. I'm like, a lot of that stuff I've been quite opposed to. Obviously, I'm much more open to it now, certainly as a result of this stuff that we've been doing.
Right.
But that one was another one just kind of dangling out there that I was like, I don't know about that. I don't know. But when we saw that in Enoch that it said that the angels are the stars are the saints.
Yes. Yes, exactly. All right, we'll be right back for second hour, everyone.
Truth Frequency Radio is your number one source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature cutting-edge programs like The Christopher Everard Show, The Covert Report with Susan Lindauer, Enemy Within Radio with Tom Barnes, Freaky Friday with The Woo Crew, The Gematria Effect with Zachary Hubbard, America's Evil Genius with Travis Cook, Phoenix Rising Radio with Phoenix, Quantum Connections with Lucky, and dozens more. Did you know you can listen from any telephone by dialing 641-793-7117 or call into your favorite show toll free at 833-TFR Live. Uncensored talk and news you won't hear in the mainstream media. Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception.
On to the Senate. I'm Lisa Lacera, Fox News. By a vote of 236 to 181, the House passing the police reform bill. It will limit qualified immunity for police officers, making it easier to sue them in civil court. It also bans chokeholds and no-knock warrants in federal drug cases. California, just one of the states seeing a new surge in cases of COVID-19.
Total number of cases. Yesterday, we had a record high, 7,149 people that tested positive for COVID-19. You'll see today that number dropped to 5,349. Still higher than we would like it to be. Still a point of concern.
Governor Gavin Newsom, who says there's also a 32% increase in the total number of hospitalizations over the last 14 days. And he says he's also issued a proclamation declaring a budget emergency due to the virus, allowing lawmakers to pass a bill that would move money from the state's rainy day fund. Today, President Trump has made another campaign stop, this time in Wisconsin.
President Trump praised workers at a naval shipyard in Marinette, Wisconsin, which just won a federal contract to build 10 new warships. He told the workers things had been looking pretty bleak at their shipyard, but this new $5.5 billion contract should keep them busy.
I have an aptitude for manufacturing, and I said it's got to come back, and it will come back, and we were doing great, and we'll do now even better. We're going to have a better year next year, I think, than almost any year in our history.
Wisconsin is a key swing state that hadn't gone Republican in decades, but delivered for Trump in 2016. However, current polling is not on his side. The Real Clear Politics average favors Biden in the state by 8 points. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Ask your Amazon smart speaker to play the news from Fox. America is listening to Fox News.
You are now tuned into the Truth Frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
We demons ascend into the firmament of heaven and fly about among the stars, and we hear the sentences which go forth upon the souls of men. And forthwith we come, and whether by force of influence, or by fire, or by sword, or by some accidents, we veil our act of destruction. And if a man does not die by some untimely disaster, or by violence, then we demons transform ourselves in such a way as to appear to men and be worshipped in our human nature. I therefore, having heard this, glorified the Lord God, and again I questioned the demons, saying, Tell me how ye can ascend into heaven, being demons, and amidst the stars and holy angels intermingled. And he answered, Just as things are fulfilled in heaven, so also on earth are fulfilled the types of all of them. For there are principalities, authorities, world rulers, and we demons fly about in the air, and we hear the voices of the heavenly beings and survey all the powers. And as having no ground or basis on which to alight and rest, we lose strength and fall off like leaves from trees. And men, seeing us, imagine that the stars are falling from heaven. But it is not really so, O King, but we fall because of our weakness, and because we have nowhere anything to lay hold of, and so we fall down like lightning in the depth of night, and suddenly, and we set cities in flames and fire the fields, for the stars have firm foundations in the heavens like the sun and the moon. And so, this particular demon is talking about how they go up there to listen and hear the sentences passed on the souls of men, and also to listen to the counsel of the mighty as they come together in congregation. And they hear about the destiny and the fate of humanity and other things that will prophetically happen. But because they have no space to rest, they fall when they just get tired, and they appear then as shooting stars, which is interesting to me, because the whole thing of Satan and the fallen angels and Legion, they can fly up there, but they have no place to, that is not their home. They can't rest there. They can't take time to just hang out and listen in and be with the rest of the angels. Their place is here now, even as Satan said, I will exalt my throne above the stars and the clouds of God, and above the mount of the congregation and the sides of the north. And then God said, basically, now I'm going to cast you down to the sides of the pit. That his place and their domain is, in my opinion, within the interior of the earth. But it is interesting to me that you said that your friend came to some of these conclusions just having read and studied, in similarity to how I was led in discernment that way.
And he's a King James only guy. He's
wow.
I don't know how dogmatic he is about King James only, but he's definitely a King James leaning guy and doesn't spend a whole lot of time looking at other stuff. Somebody was asking what you were just reading from a minute ago.
That's the Testament of Solomon, 113 and 114, chapters 113 and 114.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting thoughts, because I've always wondered, where was I before I was here? Right. If you see, they show scientific experiments where they would show under certain types of lighting and conditions or whatever, showing a sperm entering an egg, and there are many sperm trying to get into that egg, but you get that one that finally makes it in, and there's this explosion of light.
Yes.
That happens at that moment, and you're like, what is that, right? For those from a spiritual perspective, would say that's when the soul, the spirit, enters.
Yes.
That that union, because you have two,
animates the flesh.
Yeah, you have two biological pieces together. You have the egg and the sperm coming together, and fertilizing and doing what they do.
Right.
But then there's that external thing that happens, and this flash of light. That's when the me that is me enters me.
Yes.
And
so the flesh being blown into the
so
the
that
dust body.
That then begs the question: where was the me that is me before I became me?
Right.
Like what? Because we know after we die, we go somewhere. So the me that is me goes to be somewhere afterwards, and it's based on a choice that I make here, which is so like this is what enables me to at least look at this idea. Again, it's a mark of an intelligent mind to entertain a thought without accepting it, right? I haven't accepted it, but I'm looking at it and I'm weighing it and I'm going, okay, well, for me, I began, well, actually my birthday's coming up tomorrow. So I began June 20.
Happy early birthday, brother.
Thank you, man. June 26, 1969, I entered this world. Now, I was conceived, obviously, 9 months earlier. So that flash of light happened at that time, and the me that is me entered the chemical process that was going to become me, and I'm hanging out here for 51 years. We'll be 51 tomorrow. Presumably I have some more years left. So however many years I have left, and then I die, one way or another. Then I go on for eternity. Like that's always been weird to me.
Yes.
I have this finite beginning. Boom. Like I don't believe in reincarnation. And
no.
I have camera will travel. When I was doing a lot of corporate video, I can get hired to do all kinds of stuff, right? So I found myself being the camera guy at lots of different events and conferences and whatnot. This is all back in the 90s. I spent pretty much all the 90s doing that. And one time I got hired to videotape this. It was very much a New Age type event. New Agers talking about stuff, and the dominant theme of that conference was reincarnation. But like their primary thesis was that deja vu is their proof of reincarnation. I'm just there running the camera. That's my job. So I got to listen to all this. But we all went out to lunch afterwards, and they're all talking, and all the speakers are talking about the whatever, and I'm just over there quietly eating. And they said, hey, camera guy, you're kind of new to all this. What's your thoughts? What do you think about what you're hearing here? I said, well, can I be honest with you? And they're like, yeah, please. I'm like, well, I think it's a load of crap. And I wasn't even thinking about it being a load of crap just from a biblical worldview, which I certainly did. But I deja vu a lot. And the things that I had deja vu'd about, I deja vu'd about things that didn't exist before my birth. Computers, things like that.
Right.
Helicopters that that were either created right around the time of my birth or shortly thereafter. The stuff I deja vu'd about stuff that I do in life, and those things didn't exist before.
Right.
And but my take on stuff that people have flashes of understanding from quote unquote past lives, I believe it's genetic. I believe that DNA itself is a recorder, and that you can take on genetic memory from your ancestors. I think that there can be remnants. There's so much of the DNA that we still don't know what it does.
Right.
Science has called it junk DNA. They've sort of backed off from that in recent years. Because they didn't know what the heck it did. They went through the genome and they're like, well, we know this gene does this and this function is controlled by that code or what have you, but there was so much that they didn't know about, and so they said, well, this is just leftover, evolutionary junk DNA, which is garbage. I think so much of it, and there are actually like neurons, as I understand it. I could be wrong. I'm no doctor, but as I understand it, there are many neurons in the heart, just like there are in the brain, and that the heart itself has memory. And that's why, especially, it happens with other organs too, but especially with heart transplant, that people who receive a heart from somebody else, an organ transplant, they actually take on the gifts, talents, abilities, memories even. Somebody that never could play a guitar before can play it perfectly, somebody never knew Kung Fu all of a sudden knows Kung Fu, whatever. That if that's the case, then you didn't just put a piece of tissue in you. You put a soul in you.
Yes.
And so to me, there are certain, I would say probably, I would categorize them as irrational fears that I have sometimes that I deal with, that, the phobias or what have you, that there's no reason for me to have them. And so I often speculate and wonder if something didn't happen to an ancestor of mine way back, that it was a trauma to them, and because it was so traumatic, it got laid down as a genetic memory that I happen to, every now and then have a recall of it. It has nothing to do with reincarnation. So that's my feeling as far as that goes, like memories of people experience. But I also wonder about memories of angelic experience, because you could talk to really young kids, really, really young kids, and it's only like after they get to 3 or 4 years old that they start to lose it, that they seem to have a connection to the other side still.
Right.
And those are the kind of things that make me entertain the idea that maybe I was someplace before I became the me that is me.
Right.
And then I'm going to go back there, and that I'm here to make a decision.
Yes.
And all of our name. So let's just entertain this, just for the sake of entertainment. Let's say we were angels, and there was a great rebellion, and there were angels on both sides of it, good ones, bad ones, but it created a catastrophe that wiped out whatever this place was before we got the reset of Genesis 1-2. And then we come here.
Yes.
And so what I see, and I just had a discussion with somebody the other day, is that I believe that all of our names are written in the book of life.
Mm-hmm.
It is, if you reject Christ as your Savior, your name gets blotted out. And my contention is you can't blot something else unless it was there. So if you think of the phone book, it's got a lot of names in it, right? Go through a really thick, like a New York City phone book, right? A lot of names. And I see him opening up the book, looking through the names and seeing, and then depending on your decisions that you made here, you're either good to go or the Sharpie comes out.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude, I did everything I could, but depart from me, I never knew you.
Right.
And you get the Sharpie treatment, and you're blotted out of the book of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is that because angels don't get a chance to repent like the fallen angels don't?
Right.
So since the fallen angels don't get a chance to repent, what does that tell us then, if this theory is true? What variety of angels would we be if we're giving an opportunity? Did we side with them, or were we neutral? Or because the bad angels don't get to repent, so that would nullify the whole theory, right? So
well, again, in my opinion, it determines election, because I believe that how one-sided and the determination of what occurred during the war in heaven is what determines election. And those that did, rebel against the Most High, that became fallen angels, Lucifer, Legion, they are now they are still the spiritual forces that are warring against the Most High God. And I believe they are excluded from salvation, and they are the embodiment of evil, and they were cast out of the upper heavens, and they have temporary domain here. But I do believe that those that didn't make a choice, and those that did fight for God, are also still in spiritual embodiment, and that they will not take on flesh form unless God has a special mission, and he sends however many. But for the most part, I believe that class is like the Michael, the Gabriel, Raphael, the Uriel, the elect archangels that don't have to take on human embodiment. But for those that were in the middle, I do believe that we are given chance, and that we are the ones that, because we didn't make that choice and we didn't side one way or the other, that it is through the flesh that we incarnate into flesh form, and that we are given this chance again, and that this is fully what life is about. And even the example of Christ coming into the flesh to redeem us and to restore us to our first estate. It says in Revelation, remember from whence thou art fallen. And so I do believe that this is, alluding to, just as Jeremiah, I knew you before you entered into the womb of your mother. I had foreordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. That there's a passage, and I write about this in great detail in my 7th book, Skyfall, the Angels of Destiny, and talk about preexistence, predestination, and election, and all that. But There's a particular passage from the Chronicles of Jeremiah on the formation of a child, and also in the Legends of the Jews, it's called the soul of man, and it talks about how we were these spirits, and that when we entered into the flesh, the whole thing with deja vu is that the 9 months you are in the womb of your mother, you are instructed on really what's going to happen over your whole life, and you are shown even your death, and significant others and people that play a very important role in your life, family members, spouses, loved ones, things of that nature, brothers and sisters, and that these things, when they happen in your lifetime, that's what presents deja vu and the synchronicity of you having seen those events, because you were shown them before. And so people can go to chapter 9 of the Chronicles of Jeremiah, and in those passages and in those verses, it covers this in great detail. But again, the whole thing of deja vu, and then at the very end, after the 9 months, it says that basically we drink from the cup of forgetfulness, and everything that we've been shown and that we've seen, we do not remember, and then we come into the world as tabula rasa, as a clean slate. But as we go through life, and some of the things that we've seen, when they sync up, and there's a special moment of deja vu that kind of shows you that you're on the right path, or that you're doing what you should be doing, that these kind of things are confirming witness to what you were shown even before, and those things that determine your election. And with regard to reincarnation, I always bring up the story of the Gospel of Nicodemus and the Gospel of Bartholomew, and the story of how Christ, when Adam and Eve were banished from paradise, he told them that he would be born of their seed, and that at a certain time he would descend down into hell, and he would free them from their bondage. And that whole story shows that they weren't reincarnating over lifetime and taking on other embodiments, but once they died, they were basically held in Abraham's bosom, and it was from Adam to the thief on the cross. And so and then when Christ died on the cross and went down there and freed them, brought liberty to the captives, that was the first resurrection. And then they were taken up into paradise. In the Gospel of Nicodemus, they meet the thief, and he's outside of the gates of paradise waiting for Christ and Adam and all his descendants. And then he tells them the story of how he believed, and he said, Christ had told him, this day you will be with me in paradise, and he was, and he waited for them. And then when they entered into the city of New Jerusalem, all of them together, they saw Enoch and Elijah there, and they were telling them the story of how they had been preserved and had never succumbed to death, but that in the time of the end, when they go to convict the Antichrist, that they will then be killed and murdered in the streets of Jerusalem, and that they will there 3.5 days later be resurrected. But and so these kind of stories confirm, in my opinion, that, as Hebrews says, we live one lifetime and then judgment, but also that there is a portion of us that pre-existed. And the whole thing of pre-existence and election, it also explains why some are favored and some are hated, because I think that that also has to do with the rebellion. Like Esau is hated and Jacob is favored, and I believe that what occurred during the war in heaven before we came into flesh determines that election, that it's not just random, because it wouldn't make sense, a just and loving and caring God just assigning some to be condemned and others to be favored. And
I have wondered that, actually. It's one of those passages that you read, it's like, well, that's not fair. I mean, the dude's just born, and how come God hates him because he's just born?
Right. Not even born yet.
I mean, there is the Jeremiah passage, I knew you before you were born. and passages like that. I mean, these are the kind of things that help to resolve some of the questions that I've had growing up.
Yes.
Where you can be like, well, okay. I mean, if there was something that this person was before he became that person that we read about in the Bible,
right?
Again, I don't believe that he lived another life on Earth as another person. Somebody was in the chat room saying, well, there are kids that would disagree with what we're saying here, that kids supposedly can tell us stories of past lives. First of all, we can't confirm the past lives.
Right.
Well, I was so and so in the Civil War. Well, none of us been around since the Civil War, so how do you?
Right.
There's too many problems with the idea of us taking on the body and flesh of another person. I think it just gets really messy, especially with regard to salvation.
And what about judgment?
Yeah, salvation, judgment, just a ton of problems.
Right.
I don't see those same problems with the idea of us pre-existing as a being. Maybe it wasn't angels. Who knows what kind of being there was on the earth before the reset?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be another alternative that I could consider. And I think Michael Heiser actually does a good job of saying, look, angel's just a job description. It's not a being. Angel is a messenger. That's a job description. We do have being descriptions: seraphim, cherubim. It's a watcher. Even watcher can be a job description, though.
Mm-hmm, right, like the guardian angel. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat room asked, someone tell me who this is. 1 Peter 3:19, by which also he went down and preached the spirits in prison. It's my opinion that, and that's a horrible translation. Preached is what is the word? Caliphizo, if I remember right. I could be wrong. I think that's the Greek word. It's heralded in victory. Or Caruso. Maybe it's Caruso. I think Caliphizo is punch in the face. That's the thorn in the flesh sent to buffet me. I think it's Caruso. Oh, it's one or the other. I can't remember. You can just look up that passage, and I could just do it while we're here. I got the same tools. That it means heralded in victory. Preach is a lame translation. I guess is the best way I could describe it. It's not powerful enough to describe what's really happening there. It's a heralded in victory. And the word prison, if I'm not mistaken, that's Tartarus.
Yes.
So let me pull this up here. I'll share that for those who are watching. 1 Peter 3:19, in which also in prison. No, that's not Tartarus. That's not Tartarus there. But Tartarus is the prison of God. Peter does use the word prison. Tartarus later.
Where the angels are taken.
Yeah. This word right here, though, is phileke, which would be prison. And preached. Caruso, Caruso, to herald in victory, like to proclaim. So, being that Peter uses the word Tartarus elsewhere in a different passage, and he's the only author of Scripture that does, Tartarus is the prison of the gods in Greek mythology, and the gods in Greek mythology would be the Titans and what have you. So I'm of the opinion, and Patrick Heron did a really good job of describing this in his book, Nephilim and the Pyramid of the Apocalypse, I think it was called.
Yes.
Of describing what Yeshua did and going down, and basically it's like, I paraphrase it to, aha, you lose, I win, I'm taking the keys. And, by the way, when I come back, it's not going to be good for you.
Right.
Kind of a bad deal. And on the way up, he liberates the saints that were in Abraham's bosom.
Yes. Yeah, and I do agree with that as well, that it describes also, and I think it's in the Book of the Bee as well, that when he descended down into Sheol and freed them, that he also basically gave a chastising to the angels, the fallen ones.
Well, yeah, if you understand the Genesis 6 narrative as a seed war,
yes,
then and I always describe this whenever I do conferences and stuff like that, it's like, the prophecy there is that her seed's going to crush your head. If you're getting that if you're hearing that, that her seed's going to crush your head. Getting your head crushed is a bad thing, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to jack up her seed. You know, you can do everything you can to mess up her seed. And so if Satan had some kind of even vague idea that the Father was going to incarnate himself through a physical woman on earth, you know, that there would be offspring that would be the Messiah, the elect one, then he was trying to create a counterfeit of that. And, you know, the angels are coming down. Yeah, the angels are coming down and mating with women and creating a corruption of that whole concept. You know, and they all became gods, little g.
All right. Wow. All right, we'll be right back for a final segment, everyone.
Extendivite, a 7-herb combination made from garlic, cayenne, hawthorn, bilberry, ginkgo biloba, valerian, and milk thistle. Extendivite feeds our body with the right nutrients to keep us healthy. Just listen to what Arthur has to say.
I was just calling to tell you what a great product you have. I had used this about, 10 years ago after I had congestive heart failure. And it fixed me up and got me going for the last 10 years. Lately, I've been having heart trouble again, so I placed another order because this was the only thing that ever worked. And I just wanted to let you know that you have a great product.
To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Hey folks, guess what the #1 phrase that Life Change Tea receives by email? You ready? We love this tea. We love this tea. Time after time, week after week, we love this tea. Life Change Tea gives you more energy, a beautiful cleansing, and fulfills its slogan perfectly. The tea that makes you go. So if you want to be on your health game, log on to getthetea.com and order Life Change Super Strength Tea. Packages come in a 1-month supply, and when you brew this stuff, wait until you see the results. Aren't we all about the results? And with a lot of people's health struggling, we can use a little bit of help. Doctors will tell you disease starts in the gut. So log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Be our next email saying, I love this tea. I love this tea. Get the tea at getthetea.com. Helping America one tea bag at a time.
He was the deputy director of MI6, Britain's most senior diplomat. He was knighted by the Queen and in charge of thousands of highly trained spies. But he was also a member of the Paedophile Information Exchange. He had 45 diaries full of sex fantasies with children. His friend was the private secretary of Margaret Thatcher. He strangled a child and hit another with his car. He raped young boys and organized orgies with children for other politicians.
The Enigma Channel, intelligent television for planet Earth. EnigmaTV.com.
Real people, real radio. Wherever you are, make it TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
He then takes the sperm in his hand, brings it to God, and says, O Lord of the world, I have done as thou hast commanded me, and now decree what is to become of it. God then decrees that it will be either strong or weak, male or female, rich or poor, beautiful or ugly, long or short, wicked or righteous. God then makes a sign to the angel appointed over spirits and says, Bring me a certain spirit which is hidden in the Garden of Eden, whose name is so and whose form is so and so. This applies to all the spirits which are destined to be created. For from the very moment when the world was created, all these spirits were prepared for men. As it is said, what has already been has been called by name. The angel brings the said spirit, which when it comes before God, bows down and prostrates itself before him. At that moment, God says to the spirit, Enter thou this sperm. That's the Chronicles of Jeremiah, the formation of a child. It's very much longer and gets in very much more depth, especially with the deja vu and showing, each of the spirits that are to be born, what's going to happen over the course of its lifetime and how it should follow righteousness instead of wickedness so that it can go to a paradise instead of Gehenna. But people can check that out for themselves.
So when does how far back does that book date to? Like what's the accepted time period that book was written?
The Chronicles of Jeremiah, I think it's like 8th century, 9th century, something of that nature. But it's very much older. That's just when it was compiled by an individual named Moses Gaster, who did like Louis Ginsburg when he put together in chronological order all of what were the midrash that became the Legends of the Jews. He, in similarity, he released that book, I think it was in 1909, but those particular stories date all the way back to the 1st century and beyond. They're rabbinical commentary that's very ancient, but in similarity, this individual, it's a compilation of all these different narratives, but both of these manuscripts, like I said, this one contains in the Chronicles of Jeremiah the formation of a child, but in the Legends of the Jews, there's a similar story called the soul of a man, and it in similarity describes the same kind of events. It's different, and there's descriptions that add to each one of the chronological narratives that are presented. But there's one other place that people can read about this. It's called The Creation of Souls. It's in a Jewish folklore and fairy tale book put out by Aunt Naomi, who compiled a long time in the past a book of Jewish tales and fairy tales and folklore and those kind of stories, and it also has in its account the creation of the soul. But all these are very ancient in my opinion.
Maybe perhaps related to that, have you heard of, I'm sure you probably have, the silver cord?
Yes. Yes.
And people can just Google it, the silver cord, if you're not familiar with it, but that there was this concept that after a person dies, there's like an umbilical cord attached to the spirit, the soul, whatever, the person, and that it hangs around for 3 days, and by day 4, the body begins to decompose, and so that's when the cord is severed and the spirit leaves. And that's why when you read about that, you can be tempted to just write it off as Jewish folklore, myth, or whatever, until you realize, when you start applying these things, that the authors of Scripture understood these things. Like they were aware of these things. And it makes me think that Yeshua was aware of it too. And then if he was, then there must be some truth to it. Either that or he's just playing to the crowd, because he intentionally waited to the 4th day to resurrect Lazarus right before he was about to go to the cross himself. Like he knew that their faith was going to be challenged.
Right.
You know, and this guy was somebody he loved. He was a friend, like a really good friend, and he loved this guy. You know,
Right.
And they'd seen him raise other people from the dead. So why did he allow his friend to die and not do anything about it? And they bound him up, put him in the grave, and he'd been in. And he's like, yeah, no problem. He's like, but surely he stinketh, right? Like,
Yes.
he's gonna stink. So I mean, they're saying he's been in there for 4 days. Like, this was a big deal. And he says, look, I am the resurrection and the life. That's not a problem for me. And it almost as if to give a preview of things to come, that like,
right.
yeah, I'm going to raise this guy, because they all had this understanding of the silver cord and that it had been severed. Like, because there's this belief, and even today it seems to bear out, that there's a time period that somebody can, and I've heard stuff with missionaries and other things with people that have been dead for a couple of days, and a godly person filled with the Spirit comes in there and says, "Come, wake back up,"
Right.
And a person comes back to court. Now the skeptic will say, "Well, he must not have really been dead," but look, there are lots of documented cases of people who are scientifically, clinically dead, flatline stuff dead, that have been brought back.
Right.
And now they say, if it's more than 6 minutes, you can end up with brain damage and stuff. But I've heard of plenty of cases it's more, plenty longer than that the person came back and the brain wasn't damaged, even though it was robbed of oxygen and it started to deteriorate. But the point is that they had this concept that by day 4, any hope of resurrection was over. And he's like, nope, I got this. Lazarus, get up, and he rose. So, yeah, these are the types of things that make me open to hearing more, learning more, wanting to, understand more. And somebody else posted in the chat room, is that why we get to judge angels, good or bad? And that is an interesting question too, is because if we were part of, let's say there were three groups of angels. There were the good angels, the bad angels, and the ones that didn't do anything. They were the sideliners. And let's say that's the group that has to go here because they didn't take a good stand, and they didn't necessarily take a bad stand. Okay, so if we come here and then through a life experience we accept Christ and then we're good to go to come back, then when they have the heavenly court, we're the jurors. Is that sort of the concept? I mean, is that how you would understand that, where it talks about we're going to judge angels?
Yeah. Yes. And this goes back to those of us that are incarnated into flesh form now and that endure to the end, that we are the overcomers, that the legion and the 1/3 of the angels that fell, that revolted in the very beginning, they are losing their ordinance, their place and habitation in heaven. They were cast down and banished here. We are going to inherit those ordinances. And so, yes, we will be part of the council that assist Yahushua in bringing forth judgment at the end of days. And yes, we will assist, he of course is judge, but yeah, it's those fallen angels that rebelled against him that we will help in bringing judgment against. And we are, we take over the places that they left, and the ordinances that they abandoned. And so, I do believe that that is how it will play out.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to mention one other thing before we move on, that there's also this whole concept of the guff, and it's called the treasury of the soul. And it talks about how there's this whole concept that there's a certain number of souls that are going to incarnate into flesh form that are the spirits, like the morning stars that shouted for joy, that were part of the angels in the first world age, that God is going to allow this number to incarnate into flesh form. And once all of those take on embodiment, that's it. That would be,
the last
that
one.
is what would bring on the end. But I did a show on this, and it's a very interesting concept, and people can look it up. It's called The Guff, the Treasury of the Soul, or just look up Primordial Guff. I did post it in your chat room and also in ours, but this will also help people to better understand this concept.
Primordial Guff?
Guff, yeah, G-U-F.
G-U-F.
Mm-hmm.
Man, always interesting, man.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about a
So-
lot of this stuff.
So much. All right, I want to move on to next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Wow, we only did one chapter.
I know.
It's funny.
It's
All right.
kind of interesting.
Well, yeah,
discussion
good
there.
stuff. Chapter 100 for me. Attentively consider heaven, all ye progeny of heaven, and all ye works of the Most High, fear him, nor conduct yourselves criminally before him. If he shut up the windows of heaven, restraining the rain and dew, that it may not descend upon earth on your account, what will you do? And if he send his wrath upon you and upon all your deeds, you are not they who can supplicate him, you who utter against his righteousness language proud and powerful. To you there shall be no peace. Do you not see the commanders of ships, how their vessels are tossed about by the waves, torn to pieces by the winds, and exposed to the greatest peril? That they therefore fear, because their whole property is embarked with them on the ocean, and that they forbode evil in their hearts, because it may swallow them up, and they may perish in it. Is not the whole sea, all its waters, and all its commotion the work of him, the Most High, of him who has sealed up all its exertions and girded it on every side with sand? Is it not at his rebuke dried up and alarmed, while all its fish with everything contained in it die? And will not you, ye sinners who are on earth, fear him? Is not he the maker of heaven and earth, and of all things which are in them? And who has given erudition and wisdom to all that move progressive upon the earth and over the sea? Are not the commanders of ships terrified at the ocean, and shall not sinners be terrified at the Most High?
All right, chapter 101, Charles version. Observe the heaven, ye children of heaven, and every work of the Most High, and fear ye him, and work no evil in his presence. If he closes the windows of heaven, and withholds the rain, and the dew from descending on the earth on your account, what will ye do then? And if he sends his anger upon you, because of your deeds you cannot petition him, for ye spake proud and insolent words against his righteousness. Therefore ye shall have no peace. And see ye not the sailors of the ships, how their ships are tossed to and fro by the waves, and are shaken by the winds, and are in sore trouble? And therefore do they fear, because all their goodly possessions go upon the sea with them. And they have evil forebodings of heart, that the sea will swallow them, and they will perish therein. Are not the entire sea and all its waters and all its movements and the work of the Most High? And has he not set limits in its doings, and confined throughout by the sand? And at his reproof it is afraid and dries up, and all its fish die, and all that is in it. But ye sinners that are on the earth, fear him not? Has he not made the heaven and the earth, and all that is therein? Who has given understanding and wisdom to everything that moves on the earth and in the sea? Do not the sailors of the ships fear the sea? Yet sinners fear not the Most High. I think that's as we were talking about, a reproof against the fallen angels, the rebel angels, for being haughty and proud and thinking that they could replace him and be like the Most High. And that, again, here, observe the heaven, ye children of heaven. And so, yeah, the whole thing of the judgment and the reproof and how we will judge the angels, it's because we're going to replace them, and they are losing out in this whole deal.
I was just thinking, going through that, like, you ever wonder what the purpose of fish are? It's kind of a random thought, I think, but I understand the purpose and function that insects, birds, and especially since I started farming, or I don't know if I'd call it farming, but gardening. How the worms work, how the bees pollinate, and how the birds, and how the function of the creatures on land. I think I got a pretty good handle on. But I was sitting there, just all that stuff about the sea. I'm going, what's the function of fish? And such a wide variety of them. I mean, my goodness, there's such a huge variety. I was looking. I'm on a list of several websites for CGI assets, 3D models, and stuff. And so every now and then, various content producers will put sales out, and so I get these emails. Oh, cool! And there was one on sharks, and you could buy these 3D shark models that you could use in your software. And in that pack, they had hammerhead shark, and with each model, you can click through, and they have various renderings, pictures of the model, that they did, so in environments and stuff like that. I'm looking at this hammerhead shark, and I'm going, what a bizarre creature,
Right.
And so many fish, the same thing, just crazy bizarre. And Sheila and I were watching Hawaii 5-0 last night, and there was an episode about this deep underwater facility that was down there from doing some mining or something on the ocean floor. And just kind of looking at all that stuff, going, man, there's such a wide variety of fish in the ocean, and one of the things that the statement that was made in that series was in that show that we're watching is that the ocean right here on Earth is 95% uncharted.
Right.
Everybody wants, we got to go to Mars, we got to go to the moon, 95%. And when you think of how much of the Earth is ocean, just a ridiculous amount of this Earth, whatever shape you think the world is, okay, it's a lot of water. And 95+% of it is completely unexplored. And what other kind of creatures can be? I mean, of the creatures that we know about in the 5% or so that we have explored, there's a huge variety of fish and aquatic beings.
Right.
And what's even deeper and farther in the other parts that we don't know? You ever just think about it? What is the purpose of those things? What do they do?
Yeah, that's a whole nother world. And I think the fish, like the animals, they all prey off of one another. There's the lions that are the king of the jungle, and the cats that are the predators and things of that nature, and they are all feeding off of each other and sustaining what is the harmony of the creation. And the fish seem to do that same thing, all the way from the plankton, the algae, to the huge sperm whales. I mean, massive creatures. And there is a lot of things we don't know. I remember seeing this one particular part of this show where it showed this heavy water, that there's this whole lake
under
heavy
the ocean.
water.
Yeah, there's a lake. There's a lake under the ocean.
Yeah, and they were trying to descend down into it and couldn't
they kept
reach
bouncing
it.
up. Yeah. I saw somebody posted in the chat room, don't the ocean produce 70-90% of the world's oxygen? That's a good point. So, fish equals poo factories to feed underwater plants. Good point. Yeah, right on.
Right.
There you go. So, I mean, there is a lot that the ocean. Well, also, if we're in and Bob Nodell's real big on this, is that everything's electromagnetic.
Yes.
And so you have the components necessary for a battery. With the salt water.
The salt water and the fresh water and the interaction.
And
go ahead. I was going to bring something else up. But
just real quick to finish that thought. I think it was Carly Sunshine, if I remember.
Yes, I was going to.
Oh, that's what you're going to say? Yeah. Well, okay.
Right.
You may know more about it than I do. Go ahead. About that.
I was just going to say that I had done a show with her a long time ago, and she was describing this same vision, and she was talking about how with the condensation and the evaporation and the way that the sun interacts with the topography and the oceans of the world, and then how the water evaporating from the salt water and also the fresh water, that it will then eventually hit the firmament. And she was talking about how that creates like almost like it's creating fresh water, and also that the salt water is then the salt is taken out, and that creates the fresh water, but that there's an interaction, and that this is what is sustaining this electromagnetic universe, that it's working all like a battery, and that it all sustains life, the way that even the sun's rays interacts with the plants and the algae to create the photosynthesis and to feed them, and everything is working in this huge congruent harmony that we as humans really fail to understand, because we think we're like the only intelligent beings, and yet really everything is, in my opinion, conscious and holding intelligence, and looking at us like we're stupid a lot of times, because we think we're above and superior to everything.
And that everything has a function. I've always said that every creature is proportionately intelligent for the function that it was designed to accomplish here on Earth. So we pride ourselves in being supposedly the most intelligent being. I'm like, but we're the only being that intentionally pollutes its own air, food, and water. And
destroys it.
And can't even figure out what gender we are and think we came from monkeys. I mean, like, are we really that smart? I mean, I'm thinking dolphins and elephants might have something up on us, on whales and a few other creatures certainly may have a leg up, so to speak, on us in terms of intelligence. But she was talking about also like the Earth being like a big distiller. So
a distiller, yes.
That the condensation and whatnot going up into the dome, rolling down the sides of the dome that's connected to the Earth and becoming the ice ring that is Antarctica. I was like, I'm like, whoa, totally
freshwater ice ring.
I'm like, I am totally tracking with that. Like,
exactly.
That's exactly what would happen. I mean, it's because it's cold, because the sun doesn't reach that far south. That water coming down would create a 300-foot high ice wall that at the coast that only increases in elevation from the coastline inland. That makes total sense to me.
Yes, exactly. And the whole thing again of the square and the compass, of how the circle of the earth inscribed upon the waters of the deep, that this was done upon a square, and the four corners and everything. And then we see that is the Antarctic ice wall, is basically the sands that stays and holds all of the world's oceans in. As it describes in the scriptures, the ends of the world.
Well, I got a text message just a little while ago from Chris and Liz Bailey and Michael Solomon and a few other people. Apparently, they got some kind of big new revelation about the firmament, and we're trying to. We're trying to. We haven't solidified it yet, but we're trying to coordinate a time, probably this Sunday night, to do a YouTube. I don't know if we'll do it live or not, and just post it later, or what. We'll talk about it, but kind of excited about it. I don't know the details of it. They're just like, dude, it's gonna be amazing. I'm like, okay, well, anything about the firmament, I'm in.
Right on. That's awesome. I'm glad a lot of people are getting interested in that aspect of biblical cosmology, because I think it is a very key component to solidifying, pun intended, as far as the creation and our understanding of it.
Well,
the design of creation.
Thinking back to the fish again, because we don't understand everything. There's a better than good chance that each variety of fish, plankton, and every aquatic life there is has a specific function. If you wipe out one of them, you mess up a huge portion of the ecosystem.
Just like the bees.
Just as I was going to say, man. We lose the bees, it's like game over, man. I mean, that's a bad deal. But I mean, the ants, the slugs, the worms, like everything, it's all got a function.
And
with a wide variety of fish, we just think, oh wow, pretty fish. We look at it when we go snorkeling and coral reefs and stuff like that. No, listen, man, like that stuff's all important.
Right. Yeah, everything. And on every level, from micro to macrocosm, it all has intelligent design behind it. It shows the complexity of life and how there's no possible way that it just came about of random circumstance.
No.
All right, brother. Another great show.
Awesome, man.
Talk to you next week. God bless everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Shalom.